In this video, we're going to look at the elasticity of demand. Elasticity basically means how sensitive we are to changes that affect our demand. So when we're looking at our elasticities of demand, there are three different types of elasticity of demand. The first one that we're going to cover in a minute is going to be what's called price elasticity of demand. Price elasticity of demand tells us how sensitive consumers are to changes in price. So basically, we're going to look at when there's a change in price. When there's a change in price, what happens to the change in quantity demanded? Are people still buying the same amount? Are people buying, if prices fall by 10%, are people buying 10% less? If prices fall by 10%, are people buying 20% less? We'll look at how sensitive consumers are to changes in the price of the goods that they buy. The next thing that affects our elasticity of demand is our income. If our income changes by 10%, do we buy 10% more of a good or service? Do we buy 10% less of a good or service if it's an inferior good? Or do we not let our income change our buying habits of this particular good or service? And then the last type of elasticity of demand that we're going to look at is our cross-price elasticity of demand. So basically with cross-price elasticity of demand, this is very similar to the price elasticity of demand, but this one says when there's a change in the price of good X, what happens to the change in the amount of substitutes or complements that we're buying? So for example, if the price of Pepsi goes up by 10%, do we buy 10% less Pepsi and 10% more Coke? So what's the change in quantity demanded of a related good? So we'll call this good Y going to be. And then this one is when there's a change in income, what happens to the change in quantity demanded? So when we're looking at the price elasticity of demand, all the three different ones that we're going to look at are going to have to do with a change in quantity demanded. Two look at the change in quantity demanded of the good we're looking at, and one says, well, if there's a price in one good, what happens to the change in quantity demanded of the other good? So a good way of thinking of elasticity is, a lot of people use the analogy of a rubber band. And if something is very elastic, it would stretch a lot. If something is inelastic, it's not going to stretch that much. So if something is inelastic, it's not going to change that much. So if there's a change in price, for the first one, for price elasticity of demand, if there's a change in price, my buying habits are not going to be changed that much. That's what it means to be inelastic. So I'm going to make some different videos that cover these points a little bit in greater detail, and we'll also look at the math application. Don't forget to look in your workbook when going through these videos, because the math application of price elasticity of demand, income elasticity of demand, and cross-price elasticity of demand is very difficult, and it's hit very, very, very hard in the workbook. There are a number of different examples where you can look through and work out the mathematical applications of this stuff. Okay, so when you're finished with this, take a look at your workbook and then go through the remaining videos.